Imagine if everything you wrote became real, not just words on paper but actual events unfolding around you. Sounds thrilling, right? Or maybe terrifying. For one writer, this bizarre and unexplainable phenomenon is no longer just a wild idea, it's his reality. What starts as a curious coincidence quickly spirals into a nightmare as the lines between fiction and life blur. Evictions, accidents, and impossible encounters, all written in his books, all happening to him. But the real question is, how far will this story go? And who, or what, is pulling the strings? Stay with me as we uncover the chilling tale of the author who writes his own fate. If you're as intrigued by this story as I am, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more chilling tales like this. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. I'm an author, and everything I write comes true. I've been writing for as long as I could remember. Ever since I was a kid, it was my way of escaping the boring reality and immersing myself in the fictional world, which I could create by putting words on paper. From such an early age, I knew that writing was exactly what I wanted to do in life, regardless of whether I'd be doing it for free or for money. Luckily, though, through perseverance and hard work, I managed to make it a full-time job for myself and sold thousands of copies thus far. But self-promotion is not the reason why I'm here. I'm here to tell you about a series of events that happened to me lately, which I can't quite explain. Recently, strange occurrences have been happening in my life, and more I'm starting to get convinced that it is more than a coincidence or an unsavory prank. Let me take it from the top. A week ago, I returned home and found one of my books open on my kitchen table. It was my first published book called The Struggles of the Heart. The book was a fictional story, but utilized real characters, including myself as the protagonist and the people that I knew. When I glanced at the book, I realized it was open on page 124 and a certain paragraph was highlighted. The paragraph read as, "He opened the envelope and his heart started racing. He reread the lines over and over, darting over them speedily. But no matter how many times he read them, the sentences remained the same. He dropped the envelope and rubbed his eyes, sighing in despair. Although he saw it coming miles away, he didn't know how he would pick himself up from getting evicted from his apartment. He figured he could stay with his sister for a while, despite their relationship not being so good over the last few years. The first thing that struck me as odd was the fact that I didn't remember leaving the book open on this particular page, or even taking it off the shelf for that matter. I live alone, so no one else could have done it, but I figured that I must have done it unconsciously earlier when I was in a hurry to the dentist and couldn't find my keys. That still didn't explain why the paragraph was highlighted, but the book has been sitting here for years, so maybe my ex-wife fiddled with it while we still lived together. 2 days later, I received a letter in my mailbox. On top of the letter, with big bold letters, I saw the title, Eviction Notice. I rapidly skimmed through the letter and deduced that the reason for my eviction was not paying rent. This was a mistake though, because I always paid my rent on time, so I decided to go back to my apartment and make a call to fix this right away. The lady who answered the phone, although very polite and patient, was able to confirm to me that the rent had indeed not been paid, and not just that, but apparently I was late with rent a few consecutive months prior to that, and the only reason why I was not evicted was the landlord's goodwill. I explained that this must have been some kind of mistake, but the lady confirmed once more that there's no mistake, and that I have 3 days to move out. Communication with the landlord was impossible as well, since he hired an agency to do everything for him, as he lived outside the country. After hours of pursuing and trying to fix the problem, I realized that there was no point in fighting, and that I would have to look for another apartment. It wasn't until I started packing and picked up the book again that I remembered seeing the highlighted paragraph from a few days ago. I started thinking that someone was setting me up or trying to prank me, but I had no idea who would do it. None of my friends had such bad taste in jokes, and besides, it didn't explain how they would be able to get inside my apartment and do such an elaborate thing, all so they could get a kick out of my predicament. Nevertheless, I decided to continue packing and hoped that someone would jump in front of me when I stepped out of the apartment and shout, "Got you!" 2 days had gone by, and I had already arranged to move in with my sister until I find a new apartment. She was completely okay with me being there as long as I needed, and I thanked her for that. I was about to get out of my apartment with my bags packed when I saw a slip of paper under my door. I picked it up and realized that I was staring at a page from my book. It said, "The news devastated him." His older brother was also like a father to him throughout his entire life, and hearing about his car crash was like getting stabbed in the heart and the knife being twisted. The doctors said that he died instantly, crushed by the truck, so there was virtually no chance of resuscitating him. What would happen to his children now? Their mother left years ago when they were still young, and there was no trace of her anywhere. He'd gladly take the responsibility of raising them, since he saw them as his own children in many ways, but he was barely able to support himself financially, let alone 2 extra children. My phone started to ring. I answered it without even looking at the caller. "Hello?" I said. I heard my sister's voice on the other end. She was crying and gasping for air. "Kelly? Kelly, are you okay?" I asked. She whimpered for a moment before saying, "It's Michael. He's..." She burst into tears again. I felt my stomach dropping to the floor and my heart beginning to race, already anticipating the worst news. "What about Michael? Kelly, what about him?" I pressed her, but it was no use as she couldn't form words between her sobs. He had a car accident. He's gone." She burst into even more violent sobs, but before I could continue asking more questions, my phone slipped out of my hand and dropped on the floor. I felt as if I had been hit by a truck myself. I started hyperventilating and my vision got blurry from the tears forming in my eyes. I tried pushing the feeling away, but the harder I tried, the more it seemed to intensify. I dropped on the floor, crying for hours. My older brother was dead. 2 days later, I was at my sister's place. I had settled in already and we had started planning Michael's funeral. Although the circumstances of Michael's death were indeed bizarre, I was mourning and didn't even think about the possibility of someone being out to get me to such lengths that they would murder my brother. At the time, all of it being a crazy coincidence is the only explanation I had. Kelly had already flown out of state to Michael's town, and I planned to join her as soon as I wrapped up my own work. It was around midnight, and I was doing some writing to take my mind off things when I got thirsty and decided to go down to the kitchen for some milk. I drank directly from the carton, and it wasn't until I closed the fridge that something caught my attention. There, in the middle of the fridge, among Kelly's kids' drawings, stuck by a smiley face magnet, was another page from my book. With trembling hands, I picked it up, dreading what I'd read next. I had to hold the paper with both hands to be able to read it properly, as my hands were trembling so badly. It said, there was a knock on the door. Peering through the peephole, he saw his ex-wife's angry face staring blankly at him. He opened the door and braced himself for the flurry of swear words and accusations that she would force him to endure. She was right to do so, but despite that, he wasn't ready for this just yet. Just then, there was a knock on the front door. I stared in the direction of the foyer, my heart just about ready to leap out of my chest. It was so deafeningly quiet that I heard my own quivering breath until the loud knocking resounded in the house once more, almost making me jump out of my skin. The knocking sounded impatient and angry, and I knew that whoever was there at this time of the night had no intention of having a friendly chat. I slowly approached the front door, trying to be as quiet as possible, while the knocking persisted, louder and more frantic this time. Carefully, I peered through the peephole, and sure enough, my ex-wife's face stared back at me. If the events in reality followed the events in the book, then this encounter would be mostly innocuous, stressful at most, I thought. There is just one problem, though. My ex-wife died 3 years ago. And so, the story leaves us with a haunting question. Is the author a victim of his own imagination? Or is someone, using his words to control his fate? What do you think? Could you live with the power to make your stories come true, knowing the risks? Share your thoughts and let's see how this tale resonates with your imagination. Until next time, stay curious and careful what you write.